Hello there, 29 June 2023. We're still at it, the history of the British uh, 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 war on Zimbabwe. I have spoken before on this channel about the scene of the 70s, ZANU-PF scene of the 70s. I've made some prophetic videos when God will always say that the scene of ZANU-PF started in the 70s, not just Kokurawondi or Mramba Swina and election violence, but God has highlighted 2 or 3 times on this channel about the scene of the 1970s. But I never knew what he meant by scene of the 1970s. Now I know, now I understand what he meant by the scene of the 1970s. So, from what I've said in the previous video, that remember in Zimbabwe, the battle for the black people, why they went to war, was for the land issue. Why land? Because in land, the land itself is an expression of economic independence. Okay, it's not about the soil, but what the soil does, what the land does. The land is a productive uh, uh, asset, and also not only to produce food and build industries, but to own as a people. If you're in a country, you must own the land. If you don't own the land, then you don't even have a country in the first place, because the country is land, even if it's mountains that do not produce any food. But if it's supposed to be yours, it's supposed to belong to the people, and its productive capacity should therefore be allowed to benefit the indigenous people. Then those indigenous people would feel free. But however, if that land is owned by foreigners, it means that the productive set or the economic power is in the hands of the foreigners, even if the leaders are black. You understand? So the land issue was the reason why we went to war in the first place. So the ZANU-PF scene of the 1970s is this: that the battle for independence from the 60s and the 70s were led by people like Joshua Mkabo Nkomo and Dabaning Sithole, not Robert Mugabe. Please note, I will explain to you why. Because it is these people like Joshua Mkabo Nkomo who were pushing the land issue, who were fighting for the purposes of gaining the land so that we can have a sense of ownership and uh, and profit from the economic benefits that come with land ownership. That is true liberation, that is true freedom. And then if you have got the economic benefit, therefore you have got the capacity or capability to trade with other countries, buy from other countries, sell to other countries. That's what a sovereign is supposed to be. That's what an independent country is supposed to be, not one that is controlled by another country or a vassal of another state. I mean, a vassal state for another bigger a guy. So what the British did in the 70s is, seeing the movement of Joshua Mugabe, they attacked that movement from within and came up with characters like Robert Mugabe that already started election of violence in the 1970s in order to skew the support from Joshua Mugabe ZAPU to Robert Mugabe's ZANU. Now, the reason why they did that, you would think that it was just an ordinary political contestation. It was not. The reason why Britain supported ZANU was for the purposes of stopping what the liberation was doing. So the ZANU-PF scene, let me not say ZANU-PF, because PF includes ZAP. Let me say ZANU, Robert Mugabe's ZANU, their scene of the 70s that God had never told me what it is until now, is that they actually attacked the war, the, the people. No one knows because the war of the people was for land, and they attacked that. Okay, by aligning themselves with Britain, who is the enemy of the people who want to take the land. Britain was able to put into power from within the people Robert Mugabe, who has got no intention of installing the requirements of the reason why black people went to war. So that is the first sin of the 70s that ZANU committed, is by arresting the desires of the people through the personage and Robert Mugabe's part, the personage of Robert Mugabe and Robert Mugabe's patronage to the British crown. That is why they loved him. So when they made him president, he forgot the land issue and kept the land in the hands of white people. As far as him was concerned, he was now president. He had no power. He had money. So it was for own personal gratification. Him and the cronies around him at the expense of the war of the people. And the guy who kept the war of the people, the light of the people alive, was Joshua Mkabu. So they had to deal with him. It's not a matter of them hating Debeles. I need you to understand that. It's not a matter of Robert Mugabe hating Ndebeles. I don't believe Robert Mugabe hated Ndebeles. Even Emerson Mnangagwa does not hate Ndebele people. It was because Mkabu Nkomo so happened to be Ndebele, so happened to live in Matipele land. It so happened that he is the one who had the light of the nation, and therefore the enemy of the nation, which was Britain, through their vassal state in Harare, led by Robert Mugabe, had to crush Joshua Nkomo, including the people that are around Joshua Nkomo, which is the Ndebele state, the Ndebele establishment, therefore. And therefore, so in the 1980s, Britain's support or silence, they will never say they supported, because from media, it doesn't appear like that. But I'm telling you from my own observation that their guy that they put in power and they let him massacre people for years, it means that they were, by their silence, perceived or not, it tells me that they were in cohorts, probably coordinating what was going on in order to make sure that Joshua Mkomo and the dream of Zimbabwe, not the dream of the Ndebeles. I want you to understand this thing, that Gukurahundi was not attacking Ndebeles only. Okay, as a people, no. The Ndebele people were caught up in a war that Britain was waging against the dream of Zimbabweans owning that land. And that dream was in Joshua Mkabu, who so happened to be Ndebele and living amongst the Ndebeles. And so the Ndebele people were caught up in the war and died. They died because of that. And at the same time, British foreign policy against Zimbabwe had actually had a score in it. Another score was this hatred or attempt of creating a hatred or a divide between the Ndebeles and the Shonas, which to me really failed because we don't hate each other. Okay, so they needed that rift to be there so that they can divide and use their divide and conquer tactics. So that's the reason why we had things like Kukurahund. So that is the scene of the 70s that I've always spoke about, and coming into the 80s through Kukurahund. And it's the same thing that you see now, this arresting of the People's Revolution. We see it with Nelson Chamisa. Nelson Chamisa is the main opposition leader, the Triple C, who is believed is going to take over ZANU-PF from ZANU-PF. And I'm telling you that there is no plan of making Nelson Chamisa president of Zimbabwe, whether in Harare through ZANU-PF or even in USA or in Britain. There is no plan of letting Triple C to win the election. The plan is to have the revolution to be arrested in the Triple C, in the leadership of Nelson Chamisa, whom I believe is already eating mafia, called mafia money, at the same time making sure that he doesn't really push a revolution. That is why it's always talking about, I will show you a signal, and that signal will never come. It's the same thing that we had in the 70s when Robert Mugabe was propped up by the British to arrest the revolution of the people, which was expressed through Joshua Mkabu. So people like Morgan Swangirai, who formed the MTC, genuinely believed that they will lead Zimbabwe forward through election processes, genuinely believe that the British had the interests of the Zimbabweans at heart. If we don't ask ourselves a question, when Morgan Swangirai went to United States and planned a so-called coup against Robert Mugabe, remember he was recorded, and then he had to come to the country to face a trial. You ask yourself, why did those Americans record him? And why did those Americans give that recording to ZANU-PF? Clearly, it means that they were undermining Morgan Tsvangirai's attempt of taking over power from ZANU-PF, showing you that these people, these foreigners, these white people that you guys run to, don't really want Zimbabwe to succeed, but instead they want Zimbabwe to fight each other. And they twisted Tsvangirai's mind. Tsvangirai was thinking that he's with these white people that hate human rights abusers. They don't hate human rights abusers. They love human rights abusers. But however, they abuse that law, that international law of not accepting human rights abusers by putting human rights abusers in power for the purposes of putting sanctions on them and their people. Do you understand? They don't hate human rights abusers. How come they let North Korea be? All is God. God is revealing the truths about these white people, the British and people out there in European countries who pretend to love us, who pretend to prop up these opposition parties that oppose the oppressors in Africa, when they themselves put the oppressors in power, and when they are oppressing people, they say, oh, human rights abuse sanctions, but those sanctions are affecting the humans that they are purporting to protect, meaning that they never really intended to protect the citizens, but intended to actually make sure that the citizens suffer. And when the citizens suffer in their own countries, everything is destroyed and everybody looks unto Great Britain. So Britain's power, or its hold on power, is through all of you black people and your Zimbabweans looking unto Britain for dear salvation, because in your country you cannot do what the British are doing. So one of the big points I want to drive it is that what is being attacked in Zimbabwe is the system. It's our systems. What Britain has is not gold, it's not diamonds, it's not even oil. It is a system of governance that causes Britain to be a superpower. And therefore, if Zimbabwe had a system, we don't have to be a superpower, we'll be a functioning state, a functional state, but they do not want that to happen. So they attack the political system, and they deliberately attack the black ones because of the racism. I've been looking at why do they do that. I've come up to only one conclusion: it's just racism, the hatred of black people, the idea that God created white people better than them. That's what they believe, just like Hitler believed Britain and Hitler on the same WhatsApp team. Hitler believed that the Germans were better people, God created them better, and the Jews were below. So if you're a Jewish person, you will know what I'm talking about. What Hitler did to you is what the British are doing to the black Zimbabweans, because they believe that the white man in Britain is created up here and everybody else is second class and everybody else must be enslaved, and everybody else like Zimbabwe must not have a functional country that works, must not be allowed to have a system that produces engineers and people that can take over the world, but it must produce a pariah state, people who are paralyzed in their education outcomes, so that as they suffer brutal regimes in their continent, they will have to look unto Britain for dear life, to look unto the white man. Actually, it's like a desire to be worshipped, a desire to be God. Worship belongs to Jehovah, or it doesn't belong to any man or country or any king in Buckingham Palace. Don't play. Holy is the Lord. Don't play. Holy is the Lord. Those that worship the Lord shall arise and shine, for the glory of the Lord shall be upon her. Holy is God. Now, this is what really is under attack in Zimbabwe. It is the system of governance. Because if the system is proper, the country will succeed. Look at countries that Britain and the United States have not attacked, like Australia and New Zealand. I will tell you why. It's because they are white countries. Only that. There's no other reason. It's not like Australians and New Zealand people are nice people, noble people, more noble than the Rwandans, more noble than the Burundis, or noble than the Congolese. No. It's just that the system of Burundi, of Congo, of Central African Republic, of Chad, of, of, of all of those conflict-ridden areas, their system of governance is not allowed to function properly, and they mangle in there to make sure that the system produces mayhem and the collapse of good governance and the collapse of the state. But they don't do that to Australia because Australia is white. They don't do that to New Zealand because New Zealand is white. Okay, they don't do that to their European countries, France, Germany, they fixed it after the Second World War. Germany, East Germany, and West Germany, they're now okay. France is okay. Even the even the former Soviet bloc countries that joined the EU, now they are fairly stable because they know these guys that run the world. They know how to stabilize the country and they know how to destabilize the country. My accusation with them is that they deliberately stabilize white countries and deliberately destabilize black countries for the people, or solely because they hate black people, solely because it's an expression of what is in their heart, more than it's not an invisible hand, as they say in economics, that things that just happen like through an invisible hand because of market forces in the political system of the world. No, there is a visible hand that actually makes sure that Zimbabwe does not succeed, and that hand is Britain foreign policy on Zimbabwe. They've been waging that war in that Britain Foreign Policy Office that seeks to undermine the integrity of the governance systems of Zimbabwe and undermine the prosperity and the desires of the peoples of Zimbabwe through all these nefarious schemes that they have done through in the 1970s, sponsoring Robert Mugabe to destroy the revolution of Joshua Mugabe from within, including Kukura Wondi. And when Robert Mugabe had educated the country, they brought in ASAP to destroy the industrialization of the nation because Zimbabwe has these educated people. So that is why now we have got headmasters that are cleaning streets in South Africa. You have got people in Zimbabwe that have got degrees in accounting, but they are just waiters, or they are working in the scullery for a white-owned business by white people who cannot add 17 plus 7. They have to use a calculator just to calculate 83 plus 23. They need a calculator to figure out what is the 10% of 500 rand. I always wonder, say, oh my God, these people, they've got big cars and big machines, and but they cannot do simple maths. How did they make that money? It's all because they are white. And why are your black people suffering? Why are you the ones who are waiters and the ones who are scholar reports? It's only because you are black, not because you do not know anything, but because you do have the capacity, you do have the education and the ingenuity to take your country forward, to take your future forward. But then you have been undermined, you have been belittled, and you have been made to think that you are less. You've been told that you are less, and therefore you have believed, and therefore you have conformed to the chains that the oppressor has put you in. That is why we are waiters, and that is why people like me who are waiters do know that I'm not just a waiter. I can lead the country. That's why I say I want to be president of Zimbabwe. No, it's not a dream, a wishful thinking. No, 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 no. I actually can. Okay, I actually can lead a country, even a whole continent. I can do that. But you see, the oppressors would want us to think that we are just waiters in a restaurant. We cannot do anything. And if I tell people that I can lead Zimbabwe, they think that, who are you? You are just a waiter. But if Jacob Zuma's son says he wants to be a president of South Africa, as he is saying, people will take him seriously because, yeah, he's Jacob Zuma's son. So what is the difference between Jacob Zuma's son and Ngobani's one? So are you telling me that he is much smarter than me, owing to the fact that his father is an ex-president and my father is already an ex-president, and therefore I cannot be president of Zimbabwe? But I'll tell you something, who my father is. My father is not that guy in Zimbabwe. My father is Jehovah, who's in heaven, who's the president of the whole universe. Don't think that he cannot teach his son how to run a country. Don't play. All is God. I'm going to be the president of Zimbabwe by the glory and the grace of Jehovah. And let us push forward to build a country, to build systems that's going to work for Zimbabweans and fight this British foreign policy agenda of destroying the political and socio-economic system of Zimbabwe. So when I come in there in Harare, what I want to work with is the Zimbabwean population, the Zimbabwean population as a whole, not just the intellectuals. I will want the intellectuals of Zimbabwe from around the world to come back to Harare, to come back to Zimbabwe, and to rebuild the country region by region. I want the engineers that are in Australia, that are in the New Zealand, that are in China or USA or UK to come back home. I want them with their big ideas and strategies to work with me and work with my government to create a system that builds our nation and makes us to transcend from just being ordinary, a country not just to aim to be an upper middle class economy. That's not my aim. I want to take over the world. Well, is God, we can also be one of the world leading countries in the world. Holy is God, because we can and we have got the capacity, we have got Jehovah on the inside of us. And those people who worship devil, worship as these Illuminatis, they've got nothing. There's nothing on us when we worship Jehovah. Usatambe, do not play. Holy is God. We are moving forward. We are moving forward by the glory of God. I told you, God told us in the previous video, forget about the spirit of Nehanda. And we are Nehanda is Zupatsiri. Nehanda is tried, is failed. For the past 100 years, we have tried Nehanda. Nehanda is failed. It's time for Jesus now. Holy is the Lord. It's now for Jesus. Try the Lord Jesus. It is Jesus that's going to take this country forward. Therefore, I call you, all of you professionals of Zimbabwe, all of you Zimbabweans around the world, all of you Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe, to coalesce towards with me in building a state that is functioning, a state that respects the rule of law, a state that is actively involved in developing the human index, the human development index of our peoples, in creating employment and investing in education for education outcomes that are in line with our industrial needs and our needs to participate in the global economy in an atmosphere that Black Zimbabweans are free and are able to fairly access resources across the continent and be able to trade with very limited hindrances, especially for our arch enemy, which is Britain, that has come to brutalize us through the times of King Mzilikazi, right through Lopengula, who was forced or coerced into handing over the country through an agreement or a signature that he did not even understand, and a war that was waged against him, and he had to desert his position, and Britain had to take over our country. And thank God for people like Joshua Mkabi and Dabaningi Sithole, who arose in the early 1962, 1963 to form an alliance of black conscious people who fought this war for the liberation of our people to take the means of production. But then that liberation also, I say and I posit to you that Robert Mugabe was used by the British military service to infiltrate the ideology of Joshua Mkabi that was a shared prosperity for the whole nation. And when he did that, that's what God calls the ZANU sin of the 1970s, that was meant to derail the inevitable access to the inevitable promotion of black people from being slaves, but to being owners of the means of production and also the authors of their own destiny. So Chenjerai Wonzwe and the war veterans, when they took over land by force, it was their right to do so, because it was part of a war that was, part of a victory that was denied to them in 1980. And therefore, after the year 2000 to 2023, for the past 23 years, the British intelligence services and the British foreign policy agenda has been set towards making sure that Zimbabwe does not perform on all sorts of indicators. This is a scorched earth policy against the people of the Republic of Zimbabwe. And my name is Ngobani Zondo, and I want to preside over that nation of Zimbabwe, God willing, and the people of Zimbabwe willing, so that we go forward, move forward, therefore, and face and tell the enemy straight in the eye and say, Britain, it is enough. Britain, it is enough. Let my people go. Holy is God. As I said, my name is Ngobane Zondo, and I am running for the presidency of the Republic of Zimbabwe, but not through these shameful elections, but by the grace and glory and the willingness of Jehovah and his people. Holy is the Lord. Have a great evening.